Preparing for ERP, an ERP deployment project. We're going to look at the background to enterprise systems development. And in doing so, there is obviously the software development lifecycle that you follow in a lot of different situations when you're creating a new system. And you have those 6 steps of requirements analysis, coming up with the design specifications, design, development and test software that you have to produce. There's the implementation phase, support, and then evaluating the performance. So the first step is requirement surveys, making sure that you're going to deliver the system that the customer wants. Turn those into specifications, design and develop the software and implement it. There's then going into the coding of support and maintenance, and finally you finish the project. So loosely, there's a life cycle of plan, select, develop, implement and maintain. Why adopt an ERP system? Well, it may be that the existing systems that the company has aren't reliable, or they don't have the right functionality, or they are not going to be supported anymore by the manufacturer, in which case you've got some obsolescence to deal with. You may have high operational costs, they may be inefficient to run, there may be upcoming lack of vendor support, lack of compliance. So for example, that would be one reason why a company would move away from spreadsheets and go into install an ERP system, because at the year end and month end and just dealing with currency issues, a modern ERP system has all the compliance, in other words government reporting, built in. So that saves the management team having to run around trying to reconcile spreadsheets and that side of things. The new business model, it needs new functionality, so you may be going into a new business area, and therefore the system that you have already may not cope with that. And it also may have a lack of scalability. If you're growing quickly, then a system may not be able to cope with the new demands that you have. Too many business problems are not solved by IT. So you could develop a new piece of software from scratch using service-oriented architecture, or you could use an ERP system which is built on service-oriented architecture but has a lot of pre-built modules offering best practice. Typical ERP upgrade cycle is roughly every 5 years. And what SAP tried to do is to include enhancement packs, so that over the period of a 5-year cycle there is effectively a port into the ERP software that they sell that allows the product to be upgraded. The downside of that is that you have ERP systems that take a long time to install in the first place, because a lot of extra modules than the ones you're paid for are built in, and then you can add these enhancement packs. You can effectively release them to upgrade your system. So the kind of things that ERP might be able to solve, some reasons why they might need to change. There was certainly a great rash of people upgrading their systems as the year 2000 came along, where it was thought that a lot of systems wouldn't cope with the date change going from 1999 to 2000, but that really was quite overblown actually. But it was used as an excuse to put in a lot of kit, and also it drove some projects even when they really shouldn't have been paying any attention to Y2K, such as the Nestle project. So you may be eliminating client server server, maybe doing creating a web-based global interface for the company, global services. And it may be that other companies who you're in competition with, they are adopting ERP, forcing others to. You may need to follow suit to remain efficient. Strategy, you may be acquiring other companies, you may be diversifying into new businesses, maybe going to new markets, and that will drive the adoption of these kind of systems. And you may have the need to upgrade your system to have a better process performance, so your KPIs are indicating that the system that you have already isn't performing as well as it should. So ERP can help with that. So ERP introduction has kind of moved away from being driven by technology and the implementation of new technology, and more towards strategy and the rationales for why you would choose a certain number of business processes. You need to make the ERP business case. So focusing on the benefits to justify why the system should be there. So the kind of things that you might list: inventory reduction. This can be monetary. It can reduce costs, improve efficiency. It's at the heart of just-in-time manufacture. Data integration, to bring companies' data together and then to rebroadcast it so you have an accurate set of data that everybody uses through a range of different devices. It's important to choose the right system and not to waste money. And the way to do that is to develop a business case, which becomes the start point for the project team. It's also a target to contrast actual performance with what happens later on. And the board will require a business case in most companies to justify the spend. ERP projects are expensive, and it'll be the chief financial officer that will need convincing, and quite often certainly in a lot of small to medium-sized companies, it's the accountant within the company that actually proactively goes out and seeks new systems. But that may not be the best thing because they don't have the technical expertise. That needs to be thought about. So setting the bounds for the project, that's very important to do. Project scope. Projects need a start and end date with some defined steps, and you need to guard against having the objectives and the extent of the project changed halfway through, because then you end up with extra costs, more complexity, and a delay in delivering value. The project budgets will become overspent, and you'll overcommit some of the staff on the project because they're trying to do too much compared to what was agreed. So the scope defines the business processes included in the implementation and excludes others. You can always do a second project. ERP functionality is included to support those business processes. It defines the scope defines divisions or business units included in the rollout, and technical infrastructures that will need replacing. So you can come up with a project charter and mission statement to prevent scope creep. It kind of defines what's in the project and what isn't. So key planning criteria: what additional hardware and software will be needed and at what cost? What will the full project cost be, and what are the cost components? What is the timeline for the project, and what is the go live date? What staff are available for the project, and what are the risks associated with the project? So now, when you're starting a project like this, you need to choose the project team. And so we can look at the characteristics. Firstly, The CEO of the company must show the project is critical to company success. And in one instance, a CEO, even though it was at a point where business managers were trying to get their final quarter results prepared, accounts, he insisted that they flew down to an ERP kick-off event. And whilst it was inconvenient for the staff, it did show that it was a very important project for the company. The project team, there'll be a project sponsor, and he or she will appoint the project leader and their team. The team members will be people who are closely involved with the processes that are going to be affected. There'll be end users, managers within the company, IT staff executives who will help implement the project. Different business units will have a representation, and then the various organisational layers of the company. So one mistake that can be made with ERP implementation is not to have sufficient staff working on it. So that needs to be thought about. The team's going to face having to handle their work and the ERP work, and sometimes if you're doing parallel running, you do the day's transactions with the previous system and then do the same thing again with the new system. Do the same transactions again to just check that everything works. So you're going to get stretched team members, so you need to have the best people on it who are more capable of being stretched and still cope. ERP project work will conflict with their functional targets, so there'll be some conflict between the project and perhaps their functional managers. That needs to be managed. ERP project impact on their normal job will need to be allowed for. So if they are doing less well in another part of their role, then this needs to be allowed for, and no disciplinary action taken against them, because that will reduce morale. Parallel transactions in the testing phase will stretch them, as I said. You may need to backfill some of the key positions to give the project more chance of success. Also, the team members need to have a voice in the process to feel they have ownership. So the nature of the project team, you need to determine the implementation size, and that will then determine the size of the team needed. Larger teams will be more difficult to manage, take longer to agree on issues, and possibly because you can get the kind of yes think, reach a premature consensus with some of the issues not bottomed out, and that will allow some of the staff to not contribute properly when they should have done. Smaller teams may lack the right breadth of knowledge, and they also may not include all the functional areas needed, so there could be a lack of inclusion, which could come back to haunt you later on if there's a problem with the project. So the ERP project manager, he has to have these kind of skills: be an effective planner, organisationally quite powerful, a good controller of work, sensitive to the problems of change, be technically competent, understand the business through and through, and be an effective manager of teams. The biggest factor in project success or failure is really how well the ERP project manager does his job, or he or she. So they must understand the technology, have a deep knowledge of the impact ERP can have on a firm, must work with professionals to transition from as-is to to-be states. We've talked about that before. Must envision the end result and keep things on time and budget. Must be able to resolve and even anticipate problems, particularly human resource problems. Must be a fast learner. So a series of characteristics there that the leader of the project must have. It's important to make sure that you communicate well, and one way of doing that, Cisco had a project where when they were bringing in a new system, and they called it Everest, and it had a high profile within the company. So make it clear what the project is, give it an identity, make it clear what each phase of the project will achieve. You have kick-off meetings at the start of ERP package selection and at the start of ERP implementation, and then have post regular updates on the company or project internet on what's happening. For example, if it was Cisco, Project Everest. A successful project results from care at the beginning, so keep people on board and motivated to be involved. It's also very important to make sure the rumour mill doesn't take over as your official way of communicating. So here we've got Mary in customer services. She's heard her job may go from a friend, and that friend had overheard it third hand. Mary gets depressed, anxious and demotivated, and that's because nobody communicated with her to say, what extent of changes was going to happen. In fact, Mary wasn't being fired, and her job role was actually being enhanced. But it's very important to eliminate the rumour mill as far as possible. So that's it. So that's kind of first module in preparing for ERP deployment. There are some more, so I look forward to talking to you in those. So thank you very much.